Yes, God has spoken. Now it's time to end police brutality and hold the police accountable. This video presentation will give you an opportunity to take a look at what happened 20 years ago. First, we'll show you a video regarding driving while black, and then we'll show you a demonstration that was held in Los Angeles, California, back in 1998. We can learn a lot of lessons. What is sure, we cannot continue to do the same thing and expect something different to take place. God is moving, and it's time for us to get in position and take advantage of the door that has been opened for us to come together to work to end police brutality and to hold these police accountable. Take time out, watch and share this video. Hello, I'm Prophet Elmore Richmond Jr. Yes, my son was shot by a sheriff's deputy down in Tampa, Florida. But that happened in 1998, driving while black. Johnny Cochran featured it on Cochran and Company. I'd like for you to see the episode of Johnny Cochran featuring my son driving while black back in 1998. I want you to watch the full video because you will find some information that we need to know today. Also, we can take advantage of some lessons learned.
And now, live from our New York studios, Johnny Cochran.
Good evening and welcome to Cochran and Company. Tonight, he's one of Arizona's finest and America's toughest. Sheriff Joe Arpaio built his reputation by putting inmates in tent prisons and chain gangs. But this time, Sheriff Arpaio may have gone too far. We'll find out exactly what he did a bit later in the show. But first, are police taking aim at drivers of color? We're going to meet a man who admits he was guilty of driving while black. Our Dan Broden, first with some background on a troubling trend.
He told me if I didn't open the trunk, that he could arrest me and put the children out on the street and impound the vehicle.
I thought at all times that we was really going to be shot dead.
His statement was, I could shoot you two niggers right here and nobody would know.
Their crime, they say, not speeding or any other moving violation, but DWB, driving while black.
The notion that African-American motorists should be agreeable to be stopped more frequently than anybody else because of the so-called alleged war on drugs is absolutely preposterous.
This summer, the ACLU filed suit on behalf of a group of minorities who say they've been stopped and searched on I-95 in Maryland without just cause. The motorists claim they were targeted because they fit a police profile for drug traffickers known to use a particular stretch of the interstate.
I know anytime I go on 95, particularly when the sun goes down, I have extreme anxiety. I feel quite a bit of fear.
If you talk to any African American, you will find that they have had experiences of getting stopped by police officers and checked out, or their family members or their close friends. It's impossible to talk to a black person in this country who has not either experienced this or knows somebody very well who has.
I'm a black man in America. I have had experiences that a lot of people who saw the video have not had.
This videotape shows what happened when Aaron Campbell, an off-duty 27-year veteran of the Miami-Dade police force, was pulled over on the Florida Turnpike. The officer claimed Campbell changed lanes without signaling, but Campbell claims he broke no laws.
You're a
man. I gave a signal. I gave a left turn. When I went around that truck, I saw you guys sitting there. Why would I violate law and see you guys sitting there? Give me my license, bitch. You ain't giving me no ticket. Stop resisting. Now!
Campbell is blasted with pepper spray before the confrontation gets uglier.
Don't do that. Get on the ground now.
Our statistics show that we do not target any vehicle or person. We target only traffic violators. Last year, 75% of the people we stopped were white.
While the practice of race-based profiling is something troopers nationwide appear to deny, the drivers who claim they've been singled out tell a different story.
Not all of the state troopers operate like that, but there are some who are abusing their privileges, and we need to stop them.
What we're trying to do is make justice a little bit more equal for everybody.
Joining me now in Clearwater, Florida, is Howard Richmond, who was stopped by a Florida police officer for a minor traffic violation, then shot in the back when he tried to run away. Howard was arraigned today on battery charges and resisting arrest. Also with us is Howard's attorney, Joe Episcopo, who calls this a classic case of driving while black. Joining us in Washington is Byron Warnken, law professor at the University of Baltimore. Professor Warnken is also counsel for the Maryland Troopers Association. Mr. Richmond and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening. Mr. Richmond, tell us what happened to you. How did you get shot in the back, sir?
Well, myself and a passenger was trying to catch the curfew for a beer before 3 o'clock, and we just drove to the gas station and just this officer pulled up behind us, and he said, "I need you guys to get in the car."
Let me ask you, you said it was us. There were two people in the car?
Well, I had a passenger with me, yes, sir.
All right, what was the race of your passenger?
He was a white, sir.
All right, and when the officer pulled up behind you, what happened at that point, sir?
He ordered us to get back in the car, and at that time, my passenger ran, okay? And then he put a gun in my face, and that really scared me, and he took me out the car and took me to the back of his patrol car and frisked me down real good and had his knee jammed in my back with my left arm behind my back. And at that time, you know, my back started hurting, so I just ran. I was scared, and, you know, I felt the bullets hit me, and then I heard them, and I asked him, "Why did you shoot me?" And he said, "Because you tried to take my gun, and be glad I didn't shoot you in the head."
Well, were you trying to take his gun, Mr. Richmond?
No, sir.
At the time he shot you, were you running away from him?
I was about 10 feet away from him, sir.
And where were you shot, sir?
I was shot in the right buttock and the right arm.
And what injuries did you sustain from these gunshots?
Well, unfortunately, I have a colostomy, and my left leg has a major nerve damage. My right arm has nerve damage. I'm in chronic pain, and, you know, I can't do anything now. My life is...
And tell us, Mr. Richmond and our viewers, why did you run, sir?
I ran because I was scared. I didn't feel he was going through procedures right. He never read me my rights. He didn't say why he stopped me or harassed me, rather, or anything, and I was just scared and ran.
Now, did he ever at any time tell you why he was stopping you?
No, sir.
What happened to your white passenger?
He ran, and he got away.
Did they run after him at all?
He didn't, sir.
All right, was there one officer in the car, or were there two?
It was one officer in the car.
All right, so the passenger ran away, and he stayed with you, is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right, and as far as you know, were you breaking any laws at that time, sir?
No, sir.
All right, now let's see. You have been charged with some criminal offenses. You've been charged with resisting arrest and also with battery on a police officer. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right, and you've got your lawyer there with you tonight. Joe Episcopo, thank you for joining us this evening.
Good to be here, Johnny.
Good. Now, they filed charges against your client. Are they misdemeanor charges?
They filed 2 felonies and a misdemeanor. They actually had filed 3 felonies. Right. They charged him with trying to take the police officer's weapon, but when 7 eyewitnesses, 4 of whom were policemen, contradicted that, they dropped that charge. But the other 2 felonies are not supported by the testimony of the police officer either.
And what are they? What are those felonies?
Battery on a police officer, which is a 3rd-degree felony, a 5-year offense. Resisting arrest with violence, which is a 3rd-degree felony and a 5-year offense. And at the hospital, when Howard's clothes were removed, the police officer searched his shorts and found 2 joints.
All right, and so he's been charged with possession of marijuana
Misdemeanor
also, right?
marijuana, that's correct, which I believe is probably an illegal search.
Well, that'll be interesting. Now, Mr. Warnken, I wanted to ask you about this. It seems to me in this case that Mr. Richmond is a victim, isn't he, in this situation? I mean, should an officer who stops a person, let's say for a traffic violation, we're charitable in this case, should he then be privileged to use deadly and excessive force to a person who's running away from him and shoot them in the back?
Johnny, the only information that I have is the report that was prepared by Mr. Richmond's father, as well as the newspaper reports. Sure. But based upon that, it seems to me that there are 4 levels of intrusion where there would have to be the analysis. The first level is, was the stop proper in the first instance? Okay. And the Supreme Court says yes, if there is any reasonable suspicion of any safety violation, traffic violation, whatever. The next level of analysis would be whether the frisk was permissible. And even if the stop's permissible, there would have to be a reasonable suspicion that Mr. Richmond was presently armed and dangerous. I guess that's a factual issue. And then the next level would be, was there an attempt to arrest? It seems from what I'm reading that there's some question as to whether there was or wasn't. If there was, then that would be permissible only if there was probable cause to believe that a crime was being committed. And then your last question, dealing with deadly force, would be that if the person has committed a crime, then the question is, can deadly force be used? And there the answer is yes, but only if the officer honestly and reasonably believes that that person poses imminent serious bodily harm or death to either himself or to someone else were he to escape. Well, so those are the 4 levels.
Those are the 4 levels. Now, Joe Piscopo, now let's look at the facts as you understand them.
Exactly. Under those criteria, they're not going to make any of those.
All right,
none, 0.
Well, let's look at the facts in this case. If a man is running away from you under any scenario, you should not be privileged, it seems to me, if this person appears to be unarmed, he's running away, it's been a traffic stop, you could shoot him in the back from 7 or 8 feet. Is that
well,
right,
let's start with the stop. The stop, according to the police officer, was that the headlight or a tail light was out. Now, you know, a headlight or a tail light as he's driving by. The police checked the car after it was impounded, and all the lights functioned properly. Secondly,
before you move to the second level, on that first level, and again, I don't know the facts, but if the fact finder were to find the facts as the officer alleged, then whether or not subsequently the light was working or not working, if the officer honestly and reasonably believed that there was reasonable suspicion that this safety violation occurred, then the stop
Byron, let me interrupt you on that. Haven't you found that in some cases the police, you know, and this doesn't paint all police with this brush, some people make up reason to stop you. In other words, if the light doesn't work when they check it, and the police officer said it was defective before that, he could have been lying about that to articulate a reason to come within the ambit of what the Supreme Court says. Isn't that right, Brian?
There's no question that any officer would have that power, would not have that right, but would have that power.
Yes.
Although, let me qualify what you just said, Johnny, to point out that the Supreme Court actually did approve, assuming the officer's telling the truth, did approve that a subterfuge stop is permissible. Gee, I don't normally stop people because of a light, but I'd really like to stop this guy. Fortunately, there really is a light out, or I believe there's one. The Supreme Court would make that a permissible stop.
But Byron, but I guess the point is the police officers have a lot of power.
No question.
The officer on the beat is the single most powerful figure in the justice system, and they can articulate reasons for stopping, sometimes that aren't true. But go on, Joe, you were going to continue on.
Well, let's go to the next level. When the white male passenger ran, no crime had been committed at that point, except perhaps maybe by the white male resisting arrest without violence. Howard was in the car saying yes, sir, and no, sir, providing his driver's license and identification. So in the next instance, the police officer puts the gun in Howard's face while they're searching for the white male that ran away and brings him to the back of the vehicle and begins to frisk him. At which point he finds nothing and starts to arrest him. He doesn't tell him anything. He starts to cuff him. At that point, Howard was afraid. He thought this guy was a maniac, and he took off, and he had a right to do that. He can resist arrest without violence. An unlawful arrest can be resisted without violence.
Byron, you want to respond to that?
Assuming that if the stop was illegal, then everything is illegal thereafter. Assuming that the stop was legal, then the question is, under Maryland versus Wilson, a case I argued unsuccessfully, that he can be made to get out of the vehicle. The officer probably should not draw his weapon. However, ironically enough, that would not be unconstitutional. What would be unconstitutional would be to pat him down and frisk him unless there was reasonable suspicion he was presently armed and dangerous. And again, I don't know the facts there as to what the officer believed. But in fact, he could be taken to the back of the car. He could only be frisked if there was evidence that he was presently armed and dangerous.
Well, with that analysis, we're going to take a break at this point. We're going to continue our discussion. We're going to ask the question, is this racial profiling? Is there racism on the road? When we come back, and later in the hour, America's toughest sheriff, Joe Arpaio, defends his controversial new tent prison for juveniles. Stay tuned.
Fact remains, and it seems to be undisputed, that if you are black or Hispanic, you have a 6.5 times more likely chance of being searched than if you're white.
When they stop you for a traffic violation only, not because of the car you have or the color of the skin the person has or what country they're from.
You've heard about DWI, driving while intoxicated. Tonight we're talking about DWB, driving while black. And let me go back to you, Howard Richmond. You know, tell me, do you know why your passenger ran at the initial outset?
At the time, I don't know why he ran, but later found out that he ran because, you know, I didn't know him personally. He didn't know me, and he was afraid I got in trouble or something. And, you know, that's why he said he ran.
And why do you think this police officer stopped you, took you out of the car, frisked you, and then ultimately shot you? Why did he stop you, think?
Really, I don't know why he shot me. I started to believe it's because I'm black, you know, because I didn't deserve that.
All right, Joe Episcopo, what about that? What's your belief on this matter? Why do you think your client was stopped in the first instance and ultimately shot?
Well, we have testimony from the witness police officers that about an hour before this incident, this very police officer, this Deputy Mattieo, had come into the McDonald's where the police officers was working, and he was in an excited state about how many felony arrests he had made that night. And one of the officers noted how excited he was. I think he was just psyched. He was psyched on his badge, his car, his gun, and all of a sudden he was in a situation, he's only 23 years old, he's new, and he overreacted, and he almost killed Howard.
He's a 2.5-year veteran, is that correct? And do you think this case had some racial profiling overtones to it, Joe?
Oh, I don't think there's any question that the reason Howard caught his eye as he drove by was because he had a white male, and he figured this is a drug deal going down. I mean, come on, who are we kidding here? They see a white guy with a black guy, they figure drugs are being exchanged. And he thought he was on top of a big felony, and it turned out it was just two guys who just met that were going to get a couple of cans of beer before 3 a.m.
Byron, what about that? Obviously, racial profiling is illegal in this country. All police departments will say they don't engage in it, but yet there's some evidence to show that people are stopped very often because of the color of their skin, because of an intuition of the police officer who feels this person may more likely be engaged in nefarious conduct or have drugs. Isn't that right?
Well, with 700,000 law enforcement officers in this country, we'd be naive to say that whatever scenario we painted would not apply to some of them. I can only speak for the Maryland Troopers Association, the Maryland State Police, that absolutely forbids its officers to use race as a factor in profiling. Ironically enough, the Supreme Court in '89 in Socolow does not absolutely forbid the fact that that could be a factor, but most police departments believe that in fact that would be unconstitutional if that were actually tested, and in fact do not permit their officers. Whether in fact their officers always abide by those rules may be another question, but most law enforcement agencies do not permit race as a profiling factor.
Well, we certainly would hope so. You know, Byron, I wanted to share with you a personal scenario. You know, some years back, I was the assistant district attorney for Los Angeles County, and I remember driving down Sunset Boulevard with my kids in the car. My kids were very young at the time, and I was driving a nice car, and it had my license, had a vanity plate on that car. I was pulled over, and I got out of the car. After I heard the officer get out of the car and put your hands up, I saw all these officers out with guns pointed toward me, and of course I had enough experience in the justice system not to make any furtive moves, and I went over, and the officer, of course, my kids started crying when they saw these guns. I was over at the curb. The officer went into the car and went into my bag, unlocked the bag, or unsnapped it, and found my badge and started to wave everybody off. And I said, well, wait a minute, why did you stop me? I want your sergeant out here. Well, we stopped you, we thought the car might be stolen, but the car had my vanity plates, my initials on it. And it was clear that I'd been stopped because of race. And, you know, so I can tell you personally, these things happen. And one of the setup pieces, we talked about that. If you talk to most African Americans, somebody in this country and their family has had some contact with the police. Doesn't make you anti-police, but it's a reality that takes place, and it's a tough situation. In this case with Mr. Richmond, of course, he could very well be dead, couldn't he? And that's a real problem when we allow this, don't you think, Brian?
Let me throw in another factor, and that is, you asked me before about the gun drawn. One of the reasons the Supreme Court would permit that is because of their finding that all traffic stops are inherently dangerous. And ironically, the Supreme Court did hold in Hadari D that quote-unquote innocent people do not run, and therefore there would be some reasonable suspicion because of the passenger running, which would play...
But Byron, you couldn't shoot, but Byron, you can't shoot him in the back.
Absolutely correct. The only way you can use deadly force of any kind would be if there was an honest and reasonable belief of imminent serious bodily harm or death to either that officer or an innocent third party.
Well, Joe, let me ask Joe, and what happens is when this happens, the problem is, and this is why people don't have as much confidence in the justice system as they should, what happened to this officer at this point, Joe?
Well,
shooting. What's his punishment, if anything?
First of all, the state attorney, the prosecutor who filed these charges, cleared the officer of any criminal wrongdoing, didn't even convene a grand jury to look into it. Next, the sheriff's office said it was unjustified, and he was suspended 15 days without pay. That's it.
That's where it is at this point. Well, let me ask this, Joe. Do you anticipate at least contacting the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division and asking them to take a look at this? You know, the federal government will come in and take a look at these kind of practices and policies, especially they'll look at an individual case also.
Well, Howard's father, Elmore Richmond, who runs the Power Pack Center for Social Justice in Los Angeles, has already done that. You may know him, Johnny. He has a big organization there.
I don't think I know him. I don't think so.
Well, anyway, Elmore Richmond has already done that and has already contacted all those agencies, and they're fully aware of what's going on down here, and we're hoping they come in and look at it.
Well, Howard, you did have marijuana secreted on your person. Was that why you ran, or was that one of the things that entered into your running?
That's not why I ran, because I know the marijuana, that was a misdemeanor and it was petty, and I also know if I put my hands on a police officer, that's one of the worst charges you can get. I ran because he was hurting me and he scared me. That's why I ran.
All right, and what about your record? You had other dealings with the police in the past, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And so you know how to conduct yourself, I presume, when you're stopped by a police officer?
Yes, sir. You have to be nice. If you get stupid or get an attitude, that make them treat you bad. But if you yes sir, no sir, you know, you have to practice on how to even just fake like you just trying to get out of there. You know, I'm just, you know, yes sir, no sir, and you know, I ran and I got shot for that.
And Johnny, the witnesses support that yes sirring, no sirring. There were 3 white people who don't even live in this city who were gassing up their vehicles. They drove off, and when they read the newspaper account the next day where Howard was accused of trying to take his gun, they came forward. They said that this was pure and simple. They shot this guy in the back for no reason. It happened right in front of them. They saw it. They've been caught, and they're going to pay for it. They think they're going to prosecute this guy and get away with it. I don't think so.
Well, one of the other things, Byron, that I think is also troubling is the package, as we call it, of charges that often are put on the victim, perhaps to stop them from suing civilly or to cover up what's some improper conduct. You know, resisting arrest, battery on a police officer are charges which really stem to the officer's credibility. And so very often throughout our career, when I was a young city attorney or the assistant DA of LA County, I saw these charges that weren't appropriate, where the victim had to go through a trial to get acquittal, and then end up, of course, suing at that point. And I think that's really, it may not be obstruction of justice, but I think it's improper when we see that happen. Don't you agree, if those are the facts?
Johnny, you've appropriately identified the interplay between the criminal justice system, civil litigation, and administrative disciplinary process. I designed a seminar called Issues in Law Enforcement, where we take one set of facts and examine it in the interplay of those 3. And you are right, we cannot ignore the fact that because administrative disciplinary charges come and because civil litigation comes, that sometimes cuts both ways in terms of deterring or causing police conduct or misconduct. Absolutely, that's a possibility.
Well, I think you're right. Well, we're going to ask our viewers to stay tuned as we continue this discussion of driving while black, and we'll take a further look at the issue of excessive force. Please stay tuned. Racial profiling on the road, our black motorists being pulled over because of their skin color. We've been talking to Howard Richmond, who was shot twice by a police officer doing a routine traffic stop. Howard, I want to ask you, did you, in your estimation, do anything to make this police officer feel that he might be in some kind of jeopardy after you got out of that car, sir?
No, sir.
And as you ran away, did you turn back? Did you point anything at him or anything of that nature?
No, sir. I had a big lead on this guy. I mean, the only reason why I see he would shoot me just to stop me. You know, he didn't want to run after me or something. He didn't want me to get away that bad because...
Did he say anything before you were shot, Howard?
He didn't say, stop, I'll shoot. He didn't shoot in the air. He just, I felt those bullets hit me, and that was it.
And how many times were you shot?
I was shot twice.
And what are your injuries now, by virtue of that?
Well, I have a colostomy, and I have major nerve damage in my left leg and nerve damage in my right arm. And I can't lift over 10 pounds right now.
Do you have children?
Yes, sir.
All right. Joe, what about this? Now we've heard the facts, and I should point out that we invited the Sheriff's Department from that locale to come and be on our show, a representative there, and they declined to do so tonight. But Joe, what steps do you plan to take in representing Mr. Richmond? You went to court today on the criminal case.
Well, we've pled not guilty, of course, and we're preparing appropriate pretrial motions. I think we should seek to have this case dismissed or evidence suppressed, or both. And if that's not successful, then we'll go to trial and kick their butt.
You expect to go to trial on the criminal case and do that? And if you are successful in the criminal case, do you anticipate that there will be a civil case filed at some point in this matter?
Well, I guess that's always a possibility, but we haven't really gotten to that step so far. I've just looked at the criminal case at this point, and we'll worry about the civil matter later. There is a 4-year statute of limitations on that, and right now the immediate problem are these improper charges that have been filed against my client.
Byron, what about that? And I think I may have asked you this before, but in many respects, if the facts that we're hearing tonight, Mr. Richmond seems as though he's the victim. What should happen to a police officer who violates the constitutional rights of a citizen, in your estimation?
If a police officer violates the constitutional rights, then that police officer is subject to a civil lawsuit under both 1983 federal civil rights violation as well as typically state law. The reality is, in my experience, because most typically governments absorb the cost of that litigation and any judgments, actually the greater deterrent effect upon police officers is administrative discipline. I handle a lot of that, where in fact misconduct can cause an officer to lose his job.
But Byron, wouldn't the greater deterrent be a strong U.S. attorney who would come in and say, we're not going to tolerate this?
That's
this
right.
Is excessive
Exactly.
force, and when you do that, he's going to be charged with attempted murder or some kind of assault with a deadly weapon.
Aggravated battery.
Wouldn't that be true, Byron?
You raise the right question, because 25 years ago, we would be much less likely to bring criminal charges against the law enforcement community than would happen today. So that same conduct will typically raise issues of both a criminal litigation at the state court level, as well as, particularly in the last decade, a serious issue of criminal prosecution at the federal level. We certainly saw that as a nation in the Rodney King matter in California. And so, yes, certainly as soon as that trigger is pulled, it immediately starts in the wheels in the process: administrative disciplinary investigation, civil lawsuit under state law, civil lawsuit under federal civil rights law, criminal investigation at the state level, and potentially criminal litigation or investigation through the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Well,
Yes.
you're right, and I think one of the problems is that whether or not the fox is guarding the hen house. When departments investigate themselves, very little happens. That's why you need an outside agency generally to come in. So, Joe, what do you anticipate is going to happen in this matter?
Well, I can tell you, when they questioned Howard the next morning in the hospital after they had put him on a colostomy bag, they read him his rights, and he asked for a lawyer, and they didn't stop the questioning. They just kept right on going, like, well, who's your lawyer? You know, how are you going to get a lawyer? And they just ignored it and went right on with the questioning and did the longest interview of anybody in this case. And when the police officer was interviewed, he had his lawyer present, and his lawyer got to question him. This is a lot of nonsense. They're not going to get away with this.
Well, Howard, are you prepared for a long fight in this matter, Mr. Richmond?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, I wish you Godspeed in the future, and I hope that justice will be served in this case to all parties. And thank you all very much for joining us this evening.
After Howard was shot, I put it in the hands of God, because I knew vengeance is the Lord, thus said the Lord. The sheriff's department declared that the shooting was unjustified. The state attorney refused to prosecute. What happened is 2 years later, the state attorney down in Tampa, Florida, Harry E. Cole, committed suicide because they had begun to investigate his financial affairs. The officer who shot my son, Chris Mediego, less than 5 years after he shot my son, he resigned from the sheriff's department. And after he resigned from the sheriff's department, he signed out some drug from the evidence room saying that he needed it for a court case. Even on the next day, he signed out even more drugs. And then he decided to turn envelopes back in. What happened is a sad commentary. When he signed out the marijuana, he turned back leaves and twigs. And envelopes that supposed to contain the rock cocaine, he turned in wax. And the envelopes that contained the powder cocaine, he turned in soap powder. Surely he received 5 years in prison, or maybe 6 years in prison as a result of that. Sad commentary. Howard never was the same after the incident happened. And years later, because of his so-called best friend, had a relationship with his wife, and Howard attempted to take him out. Today, Howard is in prison as a result of that. The thing about that, as I look back at that incident, I can see the same thing going on today. 20 years later, 20 years ago, I worked with other families, marching and demonstrating against police brutality. I was out there in Los Angeles. I worked with other families who had a loved one that was killed or brutalized by police unjustifiably. Here's a video of what happened back in 1998 in Los Angeles. And what you're going to find, in addition to police on the streets, but also the Border Patrol, as to what was going on back in 1998. We see the same type of incident that going on today was happening back in 1998. Families were being separated at the borders. I'd like you to take an opportunity to take a look at this video, 1998.
I'm going to introduce Pastor Andrew R. Gaither. How are you? So nice to have you here. Good to see you.
Where there is no struggle, there can be no change. Free the people. Free the people. This is the most significant grassroots movement of people of color and others in America today. The Stolen Lives Project has worked untiringly to document the deaths of our loved ones from East and West. And to date, we have accumulated well over 1,000 names of individuals, many that we know and love, who have been killed either at the border or in the police custody or on the streets of America. So I want to encourage you to continue to support the Stolen Lives Project. Encourage your loved ones around the country to send their information to the various city offices throughout America so that we can continue to document and bring further attention to the atrocities of the various police departments in America. Today, the stolen lives are living because of your efforts. Free the land! Free the land!
Our next speakers will be Lucia and Donna Dimely. Donna lost her son to police murder. She's here speaking as a mother and also speaking on behalf of other mothers and fathers and sons and daughters, brothers and sisters who have lost their loved ones to police violence. Give your hand and your love to this mother who lost her young son to police violence. Donna Dimely.
Thank you. First, I'd like to send out a special thanks to the universe for this revolutionary consciousness movement to stop police brutality, repression, and the criminalization of a generation. As a mother, there's a virtual reality I have to face every morning, and that's that I'll never see my son, Mark Fitzsimmons, again. I never thought I'd be here speaking about the murder of my son, Mark, by the LAPD Southwest Division. My son was reared to be a lover of God, family, friend, and neighbor. He was taught to respect law and authority. He was gifted and graduated from Fairfax High School with honors and was accepted to UCLA at the age of 15 years old. He had a great work ethic. However, in his early 20s, he was challenged with bipolar syndrome, a chemical imbalance in the brain which causes mood swings. Little today is known about this illness. This left him vulnerable. And on the morning of July 2nd, 1998, Mark left home around 9 a.m. to go to the Bank of America for me. Little did I know I would never see my son again. On the morning of July 7th, 5 days after he was missing, I received a phone call from my parents who live in Cleveland, Ohio. The Cleveland Police Department showed up at their home and told them to call the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. My son was dead. My son died within a 2-mile radius of my house in Jefferson Park, where I sit on the board of directors, and yet the coroner's office never notified me or allowed me to identify my son. They tried to convince me it was a rightful killing. They said my son had a meat cleaver and had attacked some unnamed lady. I implore anyone who my son hurt to please come forward. They told me he confronted 2 police officers, Thomas Malcolm and Daniel Russell, Southwest Division. They were afraid of a 5'2" and a man who weighed 125 pounds, so they shot him in the chest to protect themselves. Captain Gary Brennan of Southwest Division told the community of Jefferson Park, where my son planted trees, that it indeed was a rightful shooting. Officer Rodriguez of Robbery Homicide, Southwest Division, even told my godbrother, Nevitt Green, who works for American Most Wanted, that my son was confronting the officers and they had no other recourse but to shoot him in the chest. I never believed a word they said. How do you leave home, a law-abiding citizen, disappear for 5 days and then become criminalized? When I received the autopsy report, he was shot twice in the back. Not only was he shot twice in the back, but he was driven from Jefferson and 12th Avenue, handcuffed in the back of a police car to UCLA Medical Center. Yet they gave Robin Lloyd Starks, a reporter for the Sentinel, a timeline when the paramedics was called and arrived at the scene. They blatantly lied and deceived the community. What I'm trying to convey to you today is that we are in a state of emergency. If this happened to my son, I realize it's happening over and over again throughout the United States. It's impacting all our lives. Daily lives are being stolen. As my friend Joy Johnson says, it either paralyzes you or it galvanizes you. This incident enabled me to mobilize my efforts to campaign for public awareness of police brutality, repression, and the criminalization of a generation. As my father told me, you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. People do not always feel comfortable exercising their power of choice, but as we know, our not choosing is also a choice, and we are every bit as responsible for the results of our passivity as we are for the results of our deliberate choices. Throughout history, the really fundamental changes in society have not come from dictates of governments and the results of battles, but through vast numbers of people changing their minds, sometimes only a little bit by little bit. By really changing their internal image of reality, people can change the world. As more and more people come to understand this fundamental truth and then take appropriate action, new solutions are inevitable. Transformation can only occur throughout our communities if each of us stand up and be counted. And today, you are the visible demonstration, individually and collectively, that you are standing up and being counted. As my father said, you either stand for something or you die for, or you fall for anything. But today we're all saying enough is enough. No more business as usual, rights for all. Either human rights belong to everyone or they are guaranteed to no one. We are here today demanding rights for all. Thanks for your love, thanks for your support, and thanks October 22nd Coalition and the Stolen Lives Project for providing me this platform to alert and wake up America. Lucha's going to share some stories from some of the families who's also been impacted by police brutality. Thank you.
Hay muchas familias que están aquí hoy representando los hijos y los queridos que estaban matados por la policía. Aquí tenemos la madre de José Antonio Gutiérrez, se llama Ana María Gutiérrez. Aquí, ella, Tony, era baleseado hasta la muerte por el Departamento de la Policía de Los Ángeles por el 29 de julio de 1995. Tenía 14 años. Estaba matado en la calle, enfrente de su casa en Lincoln Heights, muy cerca de donde estaba su madre, allá mirando. Tony era el hijo más mayor de Ana y era amigos con toda la gente en el vecindario. Era un estudiante bueno y le gustó jugar con sus hermanitas. Cuando estaba balaceado, sus manos estaban en el aire. Also today, we have here, not here on stage, but here in the crowd, Afifa Amatullah. She is the wife of Michael Wayne Johnson. Michael was killed by Gardena police in 1988. He was zapped all over with stun guns, gouged in the neck, and shot in the back multiple times. Michael was 36 years old. Also recently, there have been some killings here in Los Angeles. Joe Joshua was shot to death by the LAPD on October 10th, 1998. He was 76 years old. Joe was a father of 5 who fought for this country in the Korean War. He was killed less than 2 weeks ago in South Central LA. También tenemos aquí la familia de Jaime Jauregui, Amparo y Alfredo Jauregui. Aquí es la señora Jauregui. Jaime estaba matado por el 9 de marzo de 1996 en Northridge. Tenía 23 años. La policía tiró 36 balas adentro de su carro y él no tenía ninguna armas. También aquí hoy es Rafael Navarro. Él estaba golpeado casi a la muerte por la policía, pero él está vivo y está con nosotros hoy, luchando para parar ese tipo de brutalidad.
We'd like to acknowledge some other families who've been impacted by police brutality. We'd like to send acknowledgement to Igo Ibarra, friend of Sebastian Ramirez, here today on behalf of the Ramirez family. Sebastian was shot to death by the LAPD on March 22nd, 1996. He was 19 years young. He was crossing the street on his way home in East LA. Plainclothes cops were chasing someone and ran into Sebastian, who put his hands in the air. He was shot 14 and 15 times. We would like to acknowledge Lorene Harris, the mother of Dexter Herbert. Dexter was killed by the Gardena police on March 21st, 1989. He was 20 years young. Dexter was a very friendly, outgoing person. His life was cut short when he was shot in the back of the head by the police. He too was unarmed. We also like to acknowledge the Filliard family. Mark Filliard was killed by the guards on November 26, 1997. He was 33 years young. Mark was beaten to death while in custody at Twin Towers. We also like to acknowledge Constance Flam and her family, mother of Michael Arnold. On March 27, 1998, this kind, gentle, successful businessman with no criminal record was massacred by 22 police officers involving 3 agencies. Over 100 rounds were fired, ripping his life away and tearing his body to shreds with over 106 bullets. Let's give a grand applause to this family. Now I would like to introduce another family member who'd like to tell his story, Herman Harvey. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want everyone, especially the LAPD, to take a good look at my son, whom you assassinated on the 18th of October of last year. My family and I, we suffered on the 18th of this month. It's been a year ago. Chief Bernard Parks, you especially, the coroner's office, you also, mayor of this city, you also. Take a good look at me. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of you. You are rotten to the core. You do not deserve to be chief in this city or any other city. You lied to my family. You did not report that my child was dead. But yet and still, when one of your comrades was killed, you notified their family right away. Why? Are they different from me? Are you protecting your own? Are you serving your own? Yes. You all are cowards. Low down, dirty cowards. And I'm here to tell you, I will not leave the state of California. I will not leave the city, LA, until justice is served. Until justice is served. I'm from the state of Texas. My son was a deaf mute. He could not hear, nor could he talk. You all, and I mean you all as a whole, killed my son. You shot him 3 times in the back for no reason at all. And the most horrible thing about it all was that you refused the paramedics to even give him support. You are cowards. My mom taught me not to hate, but to forgive. How can I forgive you? How can I not hate you? You're low down, dirty dogs. I mean it from the depths of my heart. My family and I have suffered enough. And for those of you who think or say to yourself, as I once did, this type of thing could never happen to me. But it did. And it can happen to you. So let us stick together and do what we have to do. Don't come here pretending. I don't like pretenders. If you're going to stick with us, be with us. If we have to die, let's die together for what we believe in. I want this to be known. I want this to be heard. God knows I'm not afraid of you. You've taken my son away from me. You left him with 5 children, small children. The youngest one was 5 months old. I'm tired. I'm sick. But I'm not tired enough to fight you. Spiritually, physically, mentally, or morally. Thank you for your support. May God bless you.
Next, I would like to introduce Manuel Reyes, speaking for his son who was killed by the police.
Thank you for everybody to be here. And what I really want, I demand justice and peace. My son died in the police hands for warrants that he didn't have to die for. He served his country. He went to Vietnam to die for the officers who killed him. Vietnam was awful. because my son told me what war was about. And I love him. For as long as I live, I will always love him. I was angry to get even, but I didn't believe in getting even. I was so angry that I was getting ready to get my guns and go after him. But my God told me different. Do not do it. I will deal with them. The Lord is too powerful. And He will get everyone. There were 8 officers beat my son to death. He was put in the handcuffs. After he died, they didn't remove his handcuffs after he was in the ambulance. He died in the police hands, not in the hospital. Too much covering up. Police got his way to pay the doctors to lie than to tell the truth. They don't know the truth. Or they believe lies. They carry the badge and they serve me for what? To lie? They get away with it. If we kill somebody, where do we end up? In court. Are they going to protect us? No. They're not going to protect us. You pay lawyers so much money, and for what? My son was 35 years old, and they beat him up so bad just for 2 little warrants. I begged my son, I wanted to pay those 2 warrants. I got on my knees, but he never did listen to me. If he would have listened to me, he would have been alive right now. I took care of my son as a little baby, and I loved him. I raised him, and I gave him all my life, my love. But now my son isn't here. I haven't never gonna forget him. But I want you people to understand that I'm happy that I came today to be with you and to tell you that I'm not afraid either. I'm with you all the way 100%. And I will never rest until we command justice and peace. Be with me as I am with you. Pray for me because I pray for all of you. I always wanted to be a preacher. Never made it. But I only know that God loves us all. He will come again and He will deal with our enemies. Let the Lord decide that someday they will pay. Because I know that when I die, I will be next to my King in heaven. Faith means a lot. And as long as you believe in faith and open up your hearts, you will be with the King in heaven. Because I know that I will be there when my time will come. All I can say, God bless you, all of you. And I will always love you and thank you for everything. God bless you.
Tenemos otra historia para leer. Tenemos aquí toda la familia de Rigoberto Rodríguez. Aquí están sus primas. Rigoberto era baleado hasta la muerte por la policía del departamento de la policía del Bell Gardens en el día de Navidad, el 25 de diciembre de 1997. Tenía 18 años. Rigoberto era muy, de todo que conocieron a Rigoberto, amaron a él, querían mucho. Este día él ha llamado a la policía porque tenía un poco de depresión. Cuando vinieron la policía en su casa en Bell Gardens, miraron que él estaba sentado con su cuchillo porque ya acabó de comer. Lo balacearon ahí en su casa, enfrente de toda su familia, su tía y todos sus primos y sus sobrinos.
Okay.
Now I'd like to introduce Tom Louie, who's going to read a statement from Esperanza Rodriguez.
Good afternoon, compañeros, compañeras. We say, nosotros decimos, o todos somos ilegales o nadie lo es. Either we're all illegal or nobody is. I'm from La Resistencia, and perhaps you've heard of the case of the Kenmore 3. One of the victims in that situation, Zoila Esperanza Rodriguez, wrote an open letter about October 22nd, and she's not on stage. She's too shy, so I'm gonna read it for her, and I'll translate. Estimada gente, reciban esta carta pidiendo su apoyo y participación para el Día Nacional de Protesta contra la brutalidad policial, represión y discriminación contra una generación. Please receive this letter asking for your support and participation for the National Day of Protest. Mi vecina y yo somos víctimas de represión y discriminación por parte de la policía y la migra. My neighbor and I were victims of repression and discrimination on the part of the police and the immigration service. Fuimos arrestadas las dos en presencia de nuestras familias y vecinos en octubre de 1997, cuando agentes de inmigración golpeaban en el pasillo de nuestro edificio al joven Ronnie Vasquez. Both of us were arrested in the presence of our families and neighbors in October of 1997 when immigration agents were beating the young man Ronnie Vasquez in the hallway of our apartment building. Dijimos, no le peguen así tan feo. We said, please don't beat him like that. Regresamos al apartamento y llamamos al 911, y cuando llegó la policía, nos arrestaron a nosotros. We went back to our apartment and we called 911, and when the police came, they arrested us. Nos entregaron a migración y pasamos más de una semana en cárcel, y hoy, después de nuestra audiencia con la juez de inmigración, estamos esperando ser deportadas. The police turned us over to immigration, and we spent more than a week in jail. And now, after our immigration hearings, we are waiting to be deported. En el caso de mi vecina Maura Gómez, ella no tiene antecedentes criminales. Tiene 2 niños nacidos aquí. Y yo tengo mis 3 niños nacidos aquí, uno de ellos incapacitados. In the case of my neighbor, Maura Gómez, she has no criminal record, and she has 2 children born here. And I have my 3 children born here, one of them handicapped. Esta es la injusticia, crueldad y maldad que enfrentamos muchos inmigrantes. Al parecer de la ley, nuestro delito ha sido ser inmigrantes, ser madres y ser pobres. This is the injustice, the cruelty, and the badness that many of us immigrants are confronting. It seems that our crime has been to be immigrants, to be mothers, and to be poor. Yo vestiré de negro y participaré este 22 de octubre y les invito a todos a participar conmigo y las demás familias. Ser inmigrante con papeles o sin papeles no es ser un criminal. Atentamente, soy La Esperanza Rodriguez. I will dress in black and I will participate this 22nd of October, and I invite everyone to participate with me and with the other families. To be an immigrant with papers or without papers is not the same as to be a criminal. Sincerely, soy La Esperanza Rodriguez. Now, as you heard in her letter, 2 women are waiting to be deported just for being, quote, good citizens and calling the police like they should have. And 1 young man is about to receive 10.5 years in prison because the immigration agents beat him up and charged him with assault. There's something we can do about this. There's something we can do. And what we can do is we can pack that courtroom when he goes to trial. We can write letters to the immigration judge in charge of the cases of Zoila and Maura. We can write letters to the judge in the case of Ronnie. And we have the format for the letter right here. And most of all, we can go on November 6th, Friday, November 6th, at 6 p.m. to City Hall a few days before Ronnie's trial starts and protest there. And we're going to march from City Hall all the way to the Metropolitan Detention Center, which is on the other side of that tall building there. And we're going to say no to police and INS brutality, no to witness intimidation, no to vindictive prosecution, and no to separation of families. No! That notice is right here. And with regards to Antonio Renteria, Oscar Velez, and Jesus Valenzuela, all killed by the Border Patrol in September for supposedly having rocks in their hands, I would like to let you know that there is one group which has taken the initiative and is going to go down to the border and protest on the border because of these murders. It's a group called the Progressive Labor Party. If they're in the crowd, they can make a shout or something like that. But
thank you, my brother. Thank you.
They'll leave from 2601 Martin Luther King Boulevard, 8:30 a.m. this Saturday.
You heard the word. Let's get busy. Thank you, my brother. Thanks. Give your hands and your love to these families and to their representatives. Let us not forget the families. I come to you from a spiritual tradition, and it is my delight to share with you that spiritual tradition and also to call the names of other spiritual traditions that are represented here today. The Mayan, the Hindu, the Native American, the Muslim, the Christian, and the Buddhist, and all other spiritual traditions, and also to call attention to priest Zaya Allah of the Hebrew Israelites. Unfortunately, not everybody is able to speak, but we want to recognize the brother and the Hebrew Israelites, if they'll just raise their hand, and give thanks for their presence and their support. And we look forward to sharing with them in the future for these demonstrations. Right now, it is my distinct honor to be able to introduce to you Mr. Celeste King, longtime freedom fighter in Los Angeles and throughout the world. A man who gave his life and continues to give his life to the cause of freedom wherever it is called into question. He is the state chairman of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, past president of the Los Angeles Human Relations Commission, past president of the Los Angeles NAACP. So committed to freedom that he volunteered in World War I as a private, but that World War II, thank you, and his commitment caused him to rise to be a Tuskegee Airman. So strong has his commitment been to freedom throughout the years, maintaining himself in the reserves, that he's rose and retired as a brigadier general from the Air Force. Let's put our hands together and give thanks to this great warrior, Celeste King.
Yes.
Do you want to hold it?
Yeah. Before Mr. King speak, I just must share this with you. I am a living witness of police, excessive force, brutality, you name it. A few months ago, I was at the Martin Luther King Hospital visiting my brother-in-law. He had had a car accident, and when I came out, I got in my car. I had a ticket. It was $161 for the ticket. I couldn't believe it. So I got in my car. I said, I'm going to protest this. I go around. If anybody know Martin Luther King Hospital, it's like a U, the driveway. And just as I was coming around to go to the street, about 10 or 12 sheriff cars come squeeching up to my car and all up on the side out of the bushes with shotguns aimed at me. And I didn't know what was happening at first. I thought they were looking for somebody. I'm trying to see who they looking for. And I happened to look back, and this cop had the shotgun directly at my head and told me to get out the car. They're all screaming, get out the car. So I didn't know what was going on. I got out the car. Needless to say, I'm not going to take up much time. They arrested me, handcuffed me, put me in the car, took me to jail. Mistaken identity. Okay, kept me in jail overnight. About 4 o'clock the next evening, they came to the cell and said, we're going to let you go. We're not filing any charges. But by that time, Mr. Celeste King here had a bond there waiting for me. They sent the bond back. Never said, I'm sorry.
Celeste King. Let's give it up for our elder.
I've been around probably too long, but I'll tell you one thing. I'll make this very short. In all these years in Los Angeles, I have always been optimistic that the future will be better. But I think now that we are going to have to look in the mirror and decide for ourselves if things are going to be better. We have got to begin to turn the curve. It is getting more and more difficult out here, and we're going to have to take a lot of the responsible kind of actions. We're going to have to acknowledge that there are not going to be any particular groups or people who are going to pull us out of the predicament that we are in. You're going to have to do whatever is necessary in order to accomplish that. I would suggest that we all think about spending a few more years in school, upgrading ourselves. Now there should be almost an avalanche of people going into the community colleges and four-year colleges, regardless of your age. The only answer to this situation is what you do as an individual. And if you're going to fight a system, you're going to have to be in a position to assist in changing public policy. That means if you're going to be on the beginning of this new flow, that you've got to begin to look at the use of your time and do what it is that you can do in order to get involved at the board levels of various public agencies so that you can help. And in order to do that, education is one thing that you will need. I spent 9 years going to night school, and I can tell you those were the most enjoyable years of my life. And I think that had I not gone, I certainly would not have been able to understand the whole process. We need to understand what's going on. So let's think about it, regardless of your age. Think about where you can go to increase your learning capacity and to increase your ability to fight against the difficulties that are out here. So let's understand it. The only solution to this problem is personal education. And then let's get to doing something about it.
That's right.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you.
Celeste King.
Today, it is apparent that we cannot continue to do the same thing that we did 20 years ago. Marching, demonstrating, and allowing police just to continue to kill innocent people and not be held accountable. We need to be able to learn some lesson for what have happened over the 20 years. So we have to stop and think and see We have a president, President Donald Trump. Some of us call him racist because his action. You know, I was in the military for 20 years. I worked social action about 16 years. Yes, there was some racist supervisors and some racist commanders. But they have to be confronted. Information must be shared. Communication must take place. Pressure must be applied for them to change their ways. I'm not saying that Donald Trump is racist, but I tell you what, he have made some very racist comments, but God is a merciful God. God is faithful to every one of his promises. God can change the hearts of a president, but you must engage, you must be able to paint the picture. So it will be any doubt about the police brutality and how they are killing innocent people. We must be able to engage. Without engaging, you cannot get this done. God is working with President Donald Trump. It's now his time for a change, and the time is now. When President Barack Obama was president, I wrote him over 30 times dealing with a number of different issues. And every revelation come to fruition. Back in 2016, before his term was over, I wrote President Barack Obama. I told him it would be a dereliction of duty if he failed to take concise action to expose the gravity of the problem of police brutality within the nation. President Trump inherited this problem. President Barack Obama did do something. He sent out there was an investigation into Chicago, Ferguson, and places of that type. And the Justice Department, they did their thing. They come out with the finding. But what happened initially, General Sessions did not even want to review the report. And President Trump had already made up his mind as to the way he's going to approach this. What did I do? God had me to conduct an inquiry into the administration and the Justice Department resolved to ensure that the public was safe from police misconduct. It was concluded that although the word says, in words, it was articulated that we want to ensure that the public would be safe, but more emphasis was being placed on making sure that the police officers that go out to protect and serve are safe and protected. But there was no real resolve to hold the police accountable for their misconduct. In reality, that has not been a resolve, in a real sense, to hold the police officer accountable for their misconduct. What God said is that this must come to an end. This must change. We must hold the police accountable. God is not looking for appeasement, and this was conveyed to the President of the United States just like I'm conveying it now. Now, it's not for the President to be attacked, but we must share information very clearly to show the gravity of the abuse. Now, President Trump's heart has been touched. He opened a door.
But I want to do people that are unfairly treated, like an Alice where she comes out and there's something beautiful. What I'm thinking to do, you have a lot of people in the NFL in particular, but in sports leagues, they're not proud enough to stand for our national anthem. I don't like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say to them, instead of talk, it's all talk, talk, talk. We have a great country. You should stand for our national anthem. You shouldn't go in a locker room when our national anthem is played. I'm going to ask all of those people to recommend to me, because that's what they're protesting, people that they think
were unfairly treated by the justice system, and I understand that. And I'm going to ask them to recommend to me people that were unfairly treated, friends of theirs or people that they know about, and I'm going to take a look at those applications, and if I find, and my committee finds that they're unfairly treated, then we will pardon them or at least let them out.
Will you invite them to the White House for a roundtable about social?
You know, I don't have to do that. I'm not looking to grandstand. We got enough grandstanders in this town. I'm just saying for the leagues, if they have people, if the players, if the athletes have friends of theirs or people that they know about that have been unfairly treated by the system, let me know.
You need a celebrity advocate to get a pardon.
Well, you know, if you think about it, that becomes celebrity advocates. But they know a lot of things that we're not going to know. They've seen a lot of abuse and they've seen a lot of unfairness. So if they have, how do you like that idea, David?
Thank you for watching the video. This is the first step. But I'd like to say to you, God has spoken. Now it's time to end police brutality, and we must hold the police accountable. Now we invite you to visit our website, revelationuptotheminute.org. There are articles posted on that site, which is entitled, God Has Spoken. Now it's time to end police brutality and to hold the police accountable. In this article, you'll receive more insight of the action that we need to do today. But God has a point person. And that point person is Pastor Jerome McCrory. He'll be one of the lead person in this movement. Work with him. God will direct. God will order his footstep in your footstep. It's time to make a difference. There's no need to continue to attack the President of the United States, President Donald Trump. We must work with him, inform him, empower him with information so that God will prick his heart to make the right decisions to affect real change that is needed. That's why he's President of the United States.